if the box is 3 by 5 inches, I want to make the section of the cover that it's going to sit on a 1/2 inch longer and wider, so that there's a little bit of an overhang when the book is closed. And I need to have a 1/2 inch on these two sides and this side, because what I figured out is that where this comes open, if I have, and when I close it up, if that's completely flush with the box, then the lid wants to stay open like that. But if I give a little bit of clearance right here, it stays closed better. And I put a little bit of decorative paper overlapped right here to kind of cover up where the gap is, and it also looks like the binding of a book would look. So if this was 3 by 5, I'm going to make this section that it rests on needs to be 3.5 by 5.5. So I think, okay, I need that section to be 3.5 by 5.5. I want the spine of the book to be 1 inch, because that's how deep my book is, and it needs to fit like this. And then this section will be 3.5 by 5.5 also. So then I measure it. 3.5 plus 3.5 is 7, plus 1 more is 8. So I know I need this measurement to be 8 inches. And then this measurement will be 5.5 inches. So I need a piece of paper that's 8 by 5.5. So I cut my cardstock that's 8 by 5.5, and I cut a piece of the thick cardboard that's 8 by 5.5. Then I know that I want this center piece to be 1 inch. So I'm going to score it at 1 inch. Let me move this stuff. And if this is 8 inches long, then the center would be 4 inches. So I'll move 1/2 inch away from 4 inches and score, and 1/2 inch away from 4 inches this side and score, so that this is a 1 inch segment. Then I'm going to want to cover it for the inside of the box, this section. But I found out if I just lay one piece of paper all the way across, it's too thick in the seams by the time I go to shut it. So what I did on this one, I made a panel for this section that overhangs on this edge, and this edge, so that they can just wrap over. I'll show you that in a second. Then I made a panel for this section that's slightly smaller than 1 inch, so that it's not going to crease in my seams there. And then I painted the cardboard on this one with some green paint, so that you don't notice those seams as well. On these, I just inked the seams. So whatever you feel comfortable with. I didn't do anything to the seams on this one, so you'll be able to see it. And this is going to be my inside cover, and I want to cover it first. And what I do is cut my segment that's going to fit there, and I leave a little bit extra on this side, and this side. And I take my scissors and cut. Let me show you, turning it this way. I know where my corner is going to be. I cut from this side to this side like that, so that the corner is covered, so that when I wrap it over, I get a type of mitered corner. If I centered this right. It looks like that, and that cuts down on some of the bulk that you would have if you just had a rectangular piece of paper and folded it over. And you don't have quite as much paper in that corner. And this part's going to get covered up, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But this side, and in my haste I didn't quite get that right, but there we go. So you have this section covered that I already did. you have this section covered, and then you would take a piece of decorative paper that's longer on these two ends, and you would adhere it in the middle there. Let me just go ahead and put that down so I can show you. You would put more than that, but I just need you to see what I'm actually doing. And then instead of putting this flush, just wrapping it over like that, I leave a little bit, I kind of loop it a little bit where there's a little bit of a gap right in there. Just a tiny bit. I didn't have that one glued down. And then I would glue that down, and the same thing on this side. I would leave just a little bit of a loop so that when it closes, it's hiding that gap that's right in here. And this one is hard to tell because I've got it all wrapped, but there would be a little gap there. So I would have this covered. This is the inside cover. And then I would flip it over and use my outside cover that I have misplaced. I put the scoreboard on top of it. I would put my outside cover on it, and I went ahead and put an embossing strip that just does, it's the narrow strips, and emboss the spine of the book. I will eventually put some graphics here or something that will decorate the front cover, so I don't really need to worry about that, but I thought it was cool to have the spine of the book look a little different. So I just embossed that section. If these cover areas right there is the right size, you could emboss the front or the back of the book, but mine just was not the size that would work for that. And so you have your inside cover and your outside cover, and you would take your book, and if this was all glued together, you would center your book where there's a 1/4 of an inch overhang on each side and glue that down really well, or tape it, and then this cover would just come over and fit over it like this. And there's a little bit of a gap in there, but that's okay. That's what we wanted. For the pages, or what should look like the pages on the side of the book, I went through several different things trying to figure out what would work best. I tried accordion folding some paper and putting it on there, but that was too thick, and I tried just putting several different layers of paper, and that didn't look right. So in the end, I decided, and I already had this part on my box. I already had it attached like this, so it was a little harder. But I just took a ruler and a stylus or embossing tool with a narrow tip, and I just scored into it. Now, since it was already on my box, and my box was already put together, the middle kind of bows down a little bit, but that actually works in my advantage because that way my pages don't look completely straight. And I would just score it, move it down a tiny bit, like a 1/16 of an inch, score it, move it down a little bit, score it. And it took a little bit of time, but it wasn't really hard. It just took a little time. So what I would suggest is that you do that before you actually glue it down to the page. But I would go ahead and put the box together because that actually helps you in the end. So that you just lay it on there, score it, and see how it kind of bowed down a little bit. That gives you more of a realistic look when you're done. Move it down about a 1/16 of an inch, score it, move it down, score it. And I would do that to all 4 sides. And then on these books I went over with alcohol ink. Distress ink. I used antique linen, brushed corduroy, tea dye, or tea dye I think it's called, and the frayed burlap. And I really paid attention to the edges, the corners, because that's what would get the most wear and tear on a real book. and I just went over it really lightly. I inked it a little bit with the antique linen before I did the lines, and then I just went over it afterwards, and it gives you a little bit of a definition where the lines would be. And then I put it all together. If you found that once you put it all together it still didn't want to close well because there's so much paper involved in there, I thought of another solution. If you wanted it to look more like a diary, you could cut some little strips that match your front cover, and before you glue on your front cover, you could put a little strip that overhangs a little bit on this side and put your front cover on, and do the same thing on this side. And then when you glued your box in, it would close up, and you could put velcro or magnets on this section, and that would fold up and that would fold down, and it would hold your box secure, and it would look kind of like a diary. It would have a latch in the middle. So that's just an option if you wanted to go that way. So I hope that you understood what I was saying and I didn't totally confuse you. If you have any questions, you can email me at papercompulsions@gmail.com, and be sure and watch the other video where I show you how to make the actual box. Thanks. Bye.